Hi, we're back again, and we're going to enter the third section of Chapter 18, which is the final section. Hooray! And here we go with this. It's about social relations, which is basically talking about how we relate to each other through prejudices, aggression, conflict, attraction, altruism, and peacemaking. So, prejudice is a prejudgment. Basically, it's unjustifiable, and it usually is negative. It doesn't always have to be. But it is an attitude towards a group and its members. Prejudice is often directed towards different cultural, ethnic, or gender groups. Just so you understand, we do have prejudices against, I would say, foods and things like that have nothing to do with ethnicity. I mean, I don't like clams. Never had one, but I can just tell you, the whole thing about clams or anything in a shell like that just grosses me out. And it's a prejudice, but it doesn't mean I have some evil plot against clams. Okay. But here we're talking about people because we're talking about social psychology. So what are the components? You have beliefs, which are stereotypes, emotions, hostility, and envy, a fear, and then a predisposition to act or to discriminate. Our beliefs, basically what you're doing in that sense is you're taking, instead of taking people as individuals, you're taking somebody who happens to be from one ethnic group or another, because we're all from different groups, but wherever they're from, if they're not like you, you're taking the individual and treating them as if they represent the entire group as a whole. Bad policy to get into, but people do it. Emotions, you get upset over something, you are, it could be anything from you're a bad driver and your race is a bad driver, which, is absurd, the idea that an entire race of people is anything. Envy, there's a lot of envy in our world, especially the world we live in here in America, the materialism world, where there are the haves and the have-nots. Fear, you could have fear that perhaps those who envy you want to take your place. Fear of a growing minority group in our country. People are coming into our country in greater numbers that are not white European ancestry, and a lot of people get afraid from that, like something bad's going to happen. Who knows? And then predisposition to act, to discriminate. And therefore, because you believe these things and you have this hostility, you're going to say, well, we're not going to serve you food, or perhaps maybe I'm going to, if I have a choice to hiring some people, I'm not going to hire a certain person because I believe in the stereotypes or something negative about that cultural group. So you get the idea. Prejudice works at the conscious and more at the unconscious level. Therefore, prejudice is more like a knee-jerk response than a conscious decision. It's not that people sit there and set out to be prejudiced. It's very much they're unaware of it. And many times it has to be pointed out to someone that they are making those either statements or making certain actions that are not fair. And they are not even aware of it. Doesn't make it right. It just makes it that you have to look out for some people to tell them. Okay. So how prejudiced are people today? Basically, things are getting better, I guess you could say. Interracial marriage is an example, along with gender, homosexuality, and minorities. The prejudice against them have been decreasing. It's not where we want to be. And in the future, I would hope with each generation, it keeps getting better. I know that my growing up, I was very open to interracial relationships. I don't ever remember being angry at somebody because there were people who were not of the same background dating or getting married. It was probably less frequent. It became more frequent as I got older. But I could definitely tell between my mother and father telling me what how people reacted when they were my age, when I was younger, high school age. They said it's gotten better for me. Now I'm saying to you, it's getting better for you guys. I'm usually just okay as long as you're not dating the person I'm dating, which really has nothing to do with anybody's race. I'm okay with it. So stay away from my wife. All right, moving on. Gender. So here we have discrimination and prejudices in terms of gender. Most women still live in more poverty than men, and about 100 million women are missing in the world. There is a preference for male children in China and India, even with sex-selected abortion outlawed. What this means doesn't mean that there's 100 million women missing, like they can't find them. It means they've started to figure out that because in certain countries like China and India, males are preferred for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go into everything here. You can look it up. But it's a cultural thing. And one of the big things is the technology. The modern world has worked its way into these countries, and they can do a lot of sonograms now, where they can find out early on in a pregnancy if a woman's having a boy or a girl. And many times, if it's a girl, they'll abort it. And that is, it's sort of one of those things that makes you go, huh? But they prefer to have boys, and that is just a cultural phenomenon. And so what they're saying is there's 100 million women that should be in our population around the world that are missing, and it's getting worse. Now, despite the prejudices against women, men and women both say they prefer to talk to women, and they feel more positively towards women than they do men. And so that just here is an example of a feminized face of a male versus a more masculine face of a male. And you can see that most people prefer the picture B over A. It's just, again, another for your information. So what are the social roots of prejudice? Why does the prejudice arise? Of course, you usually have to have social inequalities, social divisions, and emotional scapegoating. If everybody's the same, it's hard to have a lot of prejudice. I mean, I don't know about every country in the world, but I'm guessing there isn't a whole lot of prejudice going on in Japan against Japanese people. I've always been told Japan is 99.8% Japanese. So there's not a lot of, they don't need to be, it's hard for them to get angry at each other. They're all the same. A lot different here in America. We're from all over the place. Okay, so, and of course there's social inequalities based on all kinds of different things, but a lot of people feel like it's based on racial lines. More often than not, it's based on economic inequalities. There are social divisions in lots of countries. We have them here based on economic lines. And then emotional scapegoating. When we get upset when we don't have something, if we see something somebody else has or we feel slighted, we tend to look for somebody to blame, and that's scapegoating. And of course, it's an emotional release, and we get upset. Sometimes scapegoating is valid, don't get me wrong. Sometimes scapegoating is just, I'm angry that I don't have what I want when I want it, and I'm going to blame somebody else. And as to which one is going on at any given time, that's hard to know, and it causes, of course, a lot of confusion. Prejudice develops when people have money, power, and prestige, and others do not. Social inequality increases prejudice. And that's kind of what I just said the last slide. But of course, the greater these inequalities get, the more you're going to have prejudice. And of course, it's an interesting topic in our country today because supposedly the rich are getting richer and the middle class is shrinking, and it's getting harder to reach that middle class dream of America. So they say. I don't know. I can just tell you that in my experience, I guess I never really wanted to put the time in to become super rich. It never was a big deal to me, so it was something I'd strive for. So middle class to me wasn't that difficult to get to. But there was a level of work I was willing to put in anyway to get there. So, but I could say that if I wanted to move up, I could tell you my lifestyle, the way I live would have to change. And I don't know if I should feel put off by that or not, if I would have to live a lot more at my job than I do now. In-groups and out-groups. In-group, people with whom one shares a common identity. Out-group, those perceived as different from one's in-group. So in-group bias, the tendency to favor one's own group. Makes sense, if we all have our own in-groups and out-groups, that can change based on situation, but definitely when you start getting into in-group based on racial lines, then you start looking at the out-group. It's very easy to start looking at the out-group, whatever racial group is different than you, which most of them are. You can become very jaded. Now, when it comes to in-group, I'm a Florida Seminoles fan, okay, Florida State Seminoles fan. Well, my in-group is everybody who likes the Florida State Seminoles. And, of course, when we hear a lot of criticism of Florida State or other things going on by the out-group, probably Florida fans, you get real sensitive about it, and vice versa. And it goes on all the time. But in that sense, we're not really talking about something to get really upset. You don't tend to get that upset over those type of disagreements with in-group and out-group as you would along racial, ethnic, religious lines, okay? Prejudice provides an outlet for anger by providing someone to blame. After 9/11, many people lashed out against innocent Arab Americans, and it was totally true. There were lots of people who most Arabs had nothing to do with 9/11, but there was a lot of American flag waving, and we got to go after anybody who is Arab in our country, and it was a weird place to be at times. I'm not saying everywhere, but a country, our country founded on freedom and people escaping their bad situations in their countries to come here, and that's all the Arabs have ever done, that are living here. They're doing the same thing we did, just not in the same century. I mean, I'm sure my grandparents or great-great-grandparents came here, several decades ago, and it's not any different for them. So it seemed a bit ridiculous. All right, cognitive roots of prejudice. One way we simplify our world is to categorize. We categorize people into groups by stereotyping them. It's not right, but it's a rule of thumb. Sometimes, stereotypes, there's some truth to stereotypes, okay? You stereotype a teacher. We're intellectual, and we tend to be kind of, I guess you could say, to some extent, nerdy. We like to talk about academic things. Well, okay, that's true, but not everything about teachers that's stereotyped is absolute. There's a lot of teachers with a lot of different personalities, just like when you do it either by racial means, ethnic means, or religious, okay? And you just want to keep telling yourself, take people as individuals, not as groups. So here you can see, basically most Muslims, most people that practice Islam are not terrorists here. You can see this little diagram, okay? Very, very small group. Most terrorists are not Muslims. In fact, I don't even know if most people know this, but we get so much press from that part of the world, the Middle East. Most Muslims aren't even Arab. They're Asian, okay? So, FYI. The tendency of people to believe that the world is just and people get what they deserve and deserve what they get is called the just world phenomenon. Kind of like each fish that's bigger is eating a smaller fish, and they all think they're just because everything's fine for them until they get eaten. So the just world phenomenon is I got what I deserved, and it was all fair for me, and I had to work through my difficulties. We don't tend to think of it in many ways that maybe I was born into a better situation than somebody else. And then we all tend to think, no, I had it harder than anybody else, and I overcame all my obstacles. And, because it's a just world, because I did it. So that's the idea there. And then finally here we have hindsight bias. You should know this already. After learning an outcome, the tendency to believe that we would have predicted it beforehand may contribute to blaming the victim and forming a prejudice against them. Okay? So you can see hindsight bias comes back into play here in the world of social psychology. That's it for this section of video. Good luck. Talk to you in class.